All right, so none of us are surprised by what happened here. We saw this coming for quite some time. Obviously, Bitcoin has now managed to smash through most of its resistance in this box here. It hasn't actually gotten above the box, but this is pretty much good enough, right? If Bitcoin starts to tumble down, we still have a bullish picture. And if Bitcoin just keeps going, then we definitely have a very bullish picture. So we're in a really good place. I'm going to be breaking down for you where I think this could be going. Obviously, none of this really takes us by surprise. So shout out to those of you that are subscribed to this YouTube channel. You've been able to keep up to date with everything that's been going on in this market. It's been so interesting and honestly a lot healthier now, I think, especially after the White House policy changes that came in after the original tariff scares. The S&P 500 obviously is going to be, pretty much leading the charge here. And it's because, I think the S&P 500 has been able to get above some of its resistance that Bitcoin is now kind of doing the same thing on its side as well. So we're going to be covering a lot of this as well. And then obviously, there's going to be some pretty cool opportunities in this market. So lots and lots to be going through in this YouTube video. Those of you that are interested, there are phenomenal bonuses available to you with the links in the description down below. These two guys, obviously two of the strongest exchanges in the game, and have been for many, many years. OKX is worth pointing out to you guys because I haven't spoken to you guys too much about them in recent years, but they are quite a big exchange as far as crypto goes. They might be bigger than Bybit by volume. It kind of depends. I'm not sure. But super useful product offerings. And one of my favorite ones is if you're in the UAE, you can withdraw straight into your bank account, which is really cool, like a direct bank connection, because they're just set up there. So that's really cool. Check that out with the links below if you're interested. You get some cool bonuses, but always, if you're not from a restricted region only, always check your country's local laws and regulations. Moving it back to the chart though, here we are, and we're seeing a really nice kind of ascension through this resistance level. Obviously, like I said, we haven't popped above this resistance level, so resistance is resistance, and that's why you might be able to expect a drop down even now. I also think it's going to depend a little bit on the fear and greed index, right? Like, we've had a lot of space for this to kind of get crazy, right? We saw 70s just very recently, and it has tapered off a little bit. We're now looking kind of closer to neutral territory, but that's going to spike up again in about 5 hours from the time we record in this, and we're going to start to see that, kind of going up again as well. So we're going to have to keep an eye on that for sure, but for the most part, this is still, a resistance zone, and, rejections have come in kind of as high as, basically 100 grand. So if I just put a line down there, we can definitely see that this has been, still a zone of some kind of significance. So, we're not totally out of the woods, but what's really strong about this, and the reason that, quite frankly, that doesn't matter to me, is because, now that Bitcoin has, kind of managed to, prove itself that it can kind of get up here, it's done a few things. It's done a few things that are really big that kind of tell us where we could be going moving forward. One of the biggest things that Bitcoin has done here is it's punched in a higher high, okay, on a macro scale, against, every high that it kind of had recently. It's done incredibly well. I mean, that's 4 highs now that Bitcoin has managed to kind of get above, which is absolutely fantastic. It's a really strong sign for Bitcoin and for bulls in this market here. And in light of that, we're kind of showing that follow through strength as well, right? I mean, there's good reason to be excited here. Kind of reclaiming 88 is a big deal. Front running, let's not forget, front running 72, and only coming down to about 74, that's a big deal too, right? Like that, all of these things, they just demonstrate that the bears do not really have that much control of the market, okay? If the bears had more control of the market, that wouldn't be possible. It wouldn't be possible for the price to, only front run support. It would have to actually penetrate deeper than support itself. It would have to get kind of, down here. Do you know what I'm saying? So the fact that we're not doing that, that's a really strong sign that the bears just haven't been able to kind of, and we've known this from the beginning. If you've been watching this channel, we were very vocal about this with this drop, right? That was a big circle. Specifically this drop right here. The first main thing I kept saying to you guys is that even though the bears finally got what they wanted, our support level was down here at 90, and they only dropped this thing down to 78, and then we immediately reclaimed the range, right? I mean, like, that's a really strong reaction, showing you that there was underlying strength throughout this drop, okay? And if you couldn't see that, you were probably way too emotionally caught up in the market. You need to recognize these things now. You can go to any other YouTube channel that's just completely forward focused on what's going on in the future, and that's fantastic. That's the right thing to do. But if you're not mixing in a little bit of self-reflection to see how you handled previous ranges, especially when things were fairly clear, because they were fairly clear over here. We were talking, you just go back and look at the YouTube videos on this channel over the past weeks and months. You'll see that we were pretty consistent about what we were saying. Even though all of that, has been happening, you should be able to kind of go back and reflect, at what your analysis looked like, and how you made decisions, and if you got emotionally caught up. Because, ladies and gents, so many of you guys, maybe not you watching this channel, but so many people in the crypto space just absolutely lost their shit on this drop. It was ridiculous. It was actually quite pathetic. I was tweeting about it personally. You can find my Twitter for my shit posting in the description right here. I was posting about it on Twitter continuously, just about how embarrassing it's going to be for everybody when this thing eventually recovers. Because I just think, and we can look at the fear and greed index, by the way. There's data on this. I'm not just pulling this out of my ass. Look at how low we went. My God, to a rating of 10. To a rating of 10. That was February 27th. So that was pretty much right around here. We went to a fear and greed rating of 10. Okay, and this is when I was telling you that the bears are not getting quite what they wanted, and then immediately we spike up by 20K. It's a joke. It's an absolute joke, ladies and gents. If you are, kind of rubber banding with your sentiment the way that this chart is moving, you need to pull your head out of your fucking ass, mate. You need to pull your head out of your ass, okay? This is bad for you. This is very, very bad for you. You should not be doing that to yourself. You need to be a lot more detached from the price action. And if you can't do that, a lot of the time, one of the common reasons is that you're trading with too much money. I hate to be a buzzkill, but if putting too much money in the market is resulting in you not able to, keep your head cool and all of that stuff, then I don't know, man. Maybe you're not taking the most efficient path for your wealth. Maybe, I don't know. It's obviously, you're going to know better than me for your personal situation. But, I've seen this a lot, and I've been doing this for over 8 years. And I tell you, there is, there's nothing that can handicap your decision-making processes more effectively than trading with too much money. I'm right, because it's fucking painful to admit, but that's just what it is. So let's get back to the charts here. Fired up, ladies and gents. Like I said, this was easy enough to spot, at least to the point where, aggressive shorts, didn't really make sense. I think that was a big thing, right? I'm not saying that, you really should have seen all of this coming, but ideally, yes, you should have seen everything coming, because that's what we're trying to do. We're in that business. But what I am saying for sure is that, sometimes the setup just isn't there to kind of take certain types of trades, right? Maybe, shorts and whatnot. Now, bringing it back to the market here, unless you're a day trader, of course. If you're a day trader, then you're anticipating closing them quickly, then it doesn't really matter what's happening. But most people, I don't know. I think a lot of people with, anything above, kind of 5-10K to trade with, they're not really day trading that aggressively anymore. It's usually people, who don't have much money. And that in itself is not a good approach. There's a whole video I can make about that, just like a massive rant style video. If you want that, tell me in the comment section. But let's get back to the charts here. And so, I think one of the big things that I'm getting at is, even if Bitcoin kind of starts dropping now, it's got, kind of support that it can benefit from, right? There have been a lot of bounces kind of coming off the bottom of this box. That's why I draw these levels as boxes, right? There's a line on the top and a line on the bottom. Obviously, I should be adding those lines as well. I just don't, because, I don't know, maybe I'm lazy. I don't actually know why I don't do that, but let's go ahead and drop those lines there now. One right there and one right there. And the whole purpose of this is to kind of demonstrate to you that, there is stuff going on in this box at the top and bottom ranges, right? You're getting nice bounces quite consistently. They're not big bounces, but sometimes they're enough, right? I mean, well, this one had a spike down, but here, sometimes they're enough, to kind of set all-time highs. And so that's something that we've got to be open to. I don't think that that's a huge possibility, I'll be honest. I think that if things start to tumble now, especially given how high they've gone, they might be due for a bit of a pullback, and we'll look at those we'll look at those shortly with, fib retracements and stuff in a little bit, but we're gonna get to that. That's the fun part. That's where, trading opportunities start kind of surfacing, so that's why I like that. But I think as far as it goes, there's support to be found here. And of course, if we fail that, we've now gotten so far above the support level here by about 7.2% with conviction, with a little bit of volume as well, that, I think we can very reasonably expect this level to be support. And this would be a kind of deviation support. I would love to hit this level. This is still, I think, going to be one of the best levels to go long on Bitcoin, but I don't know if we're going to get it. But here for sure, right? Like this is a, super well-tested support range. We really had a lot to do here for, months and months after Trump got elected. And so, this range is kind of back in play now. And this all kind of ties back into the S&P 500, right? You can't have this conversation without looking at the S&P 500. Take a look at this. So we got Bitcoin right here on the left. And we got the S&P 500 right here with a super messy chart. Let me go ahead and delete all that. And really, all I want to kind of draw your attention to is, this box right here, and then, kind of something like this box down here, right? And this is obviously so similar to Bitcoin, right? Like what the hell? If Bitcoin goes down to this level, to me, that kind of looks like the S&P 500 coming down to here. And so you can see that these charts are actually quite similar now. They've got, very, very similar developments. Obviously, Bitcoin struggled quite a bit more than the S&P 500, but I don't know. That's not fully the truth because the S&P 500 just took longer to hit its all-time high. But, we've got very, very similar kind of structures here on both charts. And especially, I think one of the most kind of potent things on this chart for me is, if the S&P 500 gets above this line, which sits at about 5,800, for Bitcoin, that line's probably more like, 101, 100K, just above 100K. In both of these charts, I would expect these charts to fly, right? Like there's no more resistance up here. There's very little going on. In fact, I can visualize this for you very easily using the fixed range volume profile. If we throw it across this entire price range, you can see these big spikes right here. These represent, where you're going to find resistance on a kind of vertical plane. And, super clearly, look, like this is that green line that I drew a couple of minutes ago. I can even adjust that down a little bit lower, and basically kind of everything above this green line. Let's make this line thick so that there's no confusion about which line I'm talking about. Everything above this yellow line here, you really start seeing that volume tapering off, which is going to really help accelerate this market. If Bitcoin can get above that level, and same for the S&P 500, right? It's the same everywhere, right? When you've got resistance levels, as you kind of get higher and higher, those resistance levels typically get weaker, right? You're not gonna spend as much time consolidating at the top as you are down below. In this case, we did, but slightly more of an exception with Bitcoin. It's much more clear that we spent a lot more time down here than we did up in this price range. So super, super messy charts, but sorry for that, and thank you for bearing with me. And so back to the S&P 500, right? Like things can definitely kind of turn around. It's been, quite an aggressive kind of correction for the S&P 500 now. We're up by 16.5%. It's only taken about 3 weeks, which is fairly quick. But we have had a pullback already throughout this uptrend, right? There was this one pullback here where everybody was saying it's over again, whatever. And even since then, now we're up by about 10%. So it's still due for a pullback by these measures, and that definitely could indicate kind of support down here. So that's why I really like the idea of Bitcoin kind of returning back to that low 90 range. That's probably the healthiest thing Bitcoin can do from here, but I don't think that there's a bad option for Bitcoin either. Like I said, if Bitcoin drops below, I'm going to be expecting a little bit of kind of support down here because it's just a good price level for Bitcoin to deviate down to, and I can totally see it happening, and it already happened once before. So, my theory is kind of already proven anyway at the same price range as well. So, looks good to me. And if it does happen to fall below this level, then, this is a bull trap and we got screwed, right? And that's where looking at things like the fear and greed index is important, right? If we start seeing that within, 5 hours when this thing updates that, we're now sitting at 72 or higher, I'm going to start saying, look, like, I mean, obviously not just based on this alone, I'm going to have to go on Twitter and, see how people are reacted to token 2049 and all that stuff. But, for the most part, if I'm seeing a lot of kind of exuberance, a lot of, just signs that like, show me like these people haven't learned, that kind of thing, then yeah, for sure, I'm going to be looking for this to be a bull trap a little bit more. Right now, I don't have a reason to be pessimistic that way, but I'll tell you what, a lot of bitter bulls and a lot of bitter bears, they do have a reason to be looking for this glorious run to end. These are going to be your Karens and energy vampires, or whatever you want to label them as, in terms of crypto. We've got to watch out for them, because if they're really, really piling on and saying that things have to be bearish now, and especially if these are the traders that didn't get their shorts in on the way down, and they long the top and they short the bottom, stuff like that. If these are the kind of people that, are now trying to trying to make really strong bear cases because it must be a bull trap because they just can't believe this, that's actually going to be a sign to me that we keep going up, right? Because it's always these people that are late to every kind of reversal that, that kind of, I don't know, they scream the loudest, they bitch the most, right? That's just kind of how it is. And they're a good, they're a good indicator sometimes, not always. I want you to keep in mind, none of these things are going to work all the time. This is where your job as a trader is to kind of, sift through that BS a little bit. But let's go ahead and maximize this Bitcoin chart again and talk about the upside from here. So, let's say, however Bitcoin does it, whether it comes down here and comes up or it just comes up from here, in both cases, this is going to be a really nice kind of support range for Bitcoin to bounce off of. And if Bitcoin can bounce off of it, then again, we're kind of just ready, strapped in for all-time highs and things to be very, very fun. Now, the result of all of this has been, quite an astronomical rise for Bitcoin's dominance. It's punched in another high, and this is a high for the entire market cycle. It's punched in a new high today. So altcoins continuing to struggle against Bitcoin. Now, again, against the dollar, you're probably doing okay, right? Here's Solana holding up exactly where it was before, right? It hasn't popped yet, which could actually indicate that if Bitcoin cools down over here, Solana could be next and other coins could be next. I wouldn't bank on that, and I'll tell you why in a second, but primarily it's because Bitcoin's at resistance. And I'm just, I don't know, it could, but we're also kind of, like I said, starting to be due for a pullback now. So that's another kind of factor that we've got to keep in mind. But yeah, Solana right here, it's looking okay. But obviously against Bitcoin, these coins are kind of, losing a little bit. Here's Ethereum against Bitcoin, which is holding up incredibly well. But again, I mean, it's just not in a good place overall. It definitely could start reversing from here. Like I said, I think here has been, just a phenomenal level to be buying Ethereum against Bitcoin if you believe that, Ethereum's not dying. I don't believe Ethereum's going to die. I don't love it. I don't hate it. I just don't care. I'm not emotionally attached to this stuff, but for sure, I think that if Ethereum's not dying, then this is quite undervalued compared to where it can be, and so for me, I'm just seeing it as a kind of easy gain, right? Like even if this thing only goes up to 0.4 BTC, that's still more than 2x on whatever Bitcoin goes in over here, which is it's not easy to kind of multiply Bitcoin holdings these days. It's really not easy anymore at all. So you kind of take what you get. If you can get a 2x, that's a really big deal. So I think that's really cool. I don't know about it yet, right? Like it's obviously, Bitcoin, with Bitcoin's dominance still pointing up so aggressively and like really not slowing down at all. And I don't see a reason for it to slow down right now either. If Bitcoin's about to break its all-time high, it could, it could be that, Bitcoin breaks its all-time high and alts rally with it. That happens sometimes, but it's not that frequent. I would say that the probability of that happening this time is probably like 30-40%, like high, like much higher. Before I would have placed it like 5 or 10. The reason I think it's, kind of closer to 50-50 now is because, it's gone up so high, and I'm just seeing, like a lot of negative sentiment here in this market that's kind of starting to evaporate. If Bitcoin starts setting all-time highs, that could just really, really lead to a sentiment explosion here. So, it's something to be aware of, but, we don't want to run too far ahead of ourselves. That's why I'm just kind of keeping my eyes locked on Bitcoin and on the S&P 500, because these altcoins, with limited exceptions, are not going to be doing anything interesting until traditional finance and Bitcoin really, really sorts itself out, and we know kind of what's going to be going on in those markets. So I think that's going to be really, really important. Let's throw a couple of indicators on Bitcoin. Please bear in mind, by the way, we've got now about 19 minutes into this video without looking at a single indicator, okay? That's how you know that this is good, sound, healthy, technical analysis. If you have to throw on a million different indicators at the very beginning just to fucking wake yourself up like a cup of coffee, you're in a very bad place. and you're going to I don't know, you're just going to you will learn if you do things properly that you don't need to make things so complicated, and you might even have a better understanding as a result of that. That's what we do on this YouTube channel, right? Like you and I, we understand very well what this market is doing, why it's done it, what it might do next, why it might do those things next. We understand all of these things quite well now, especially after 19-20 minutes in this video. People that, you know, kind of do not look at things the way we're looking at things, the ones that kind of just pile on indicators and, you know, 10 million Fibonacci's and moving out, just everything, you know, they are the people that, you know, don't really understand what's going on. They're too tunnel vision, they're too overly invested, you know, it's a number of things, but for the most part, you know, you can fix this by slowing down and zooming out. And I think, you know, a big thing that I think is important to remind you guys is that with any individual trade or investment, we're not necessarily, it depends on what you're trying to do, but we're not necessarily trying to get rich off any given move that we make with our money, right? Like some people are, but for the most part, you're probably not even watching this channel if you're one of those people. You know, for the most part, we're not aiming to get rich off any particular trade. It's that compound effect that we're going for, okay? And if we can take things kind of from that approach, then, you know, we will naturally become much more emotionally detached from the market, because we're just, you know, we're just seeing it as a bigger picture, right? If you're seeing things as a big picture, you by definition cannot get caught up in, you know, the kind of more micro stuff that's going on. So I think that's really important. But anyway, let's throw some indicators on with all of that said, and we've got a huge daily Ichimoku resistance cloud that we've just blasted through, so that's fantastic. Good job there. Big cloud of support for Bitcoin down all the way down to about 87, which is exactly the lower price range that I was looking at here. So this is pretty cool. That tells me that if a drop happens soon, then we could drop pretty sharp. But if it takes a little bit of time, then our support is probably going to be raising a little bit, which makes total sense. You know, that's usually how it goes, right? If you have a if you have a kind of situation in the market where you know, you pull back quickly, that those pullbacks tend to be sharp. But if you pull back a little bit slower, they tend to be a little bit shallower, right? So again, you get two types of corrections. One of them is a price-based correction where you move down. The other one is a time-based correction where you move sideways, right? Both of them are painful. They're painful for different reasons. Arguably, time is more painful than price, I would say. And I do think so, right? I think like now that we can kind of look back, I'm glad. I don't know about you guys, that, you know, I'm glad that this was just 45 days of corrective price action, right? From losing support from the all-time high. It was a little bit more. It was more like kind of 2.5 months, but you know, at least it was volatile. You know what I mean? Like it's so much worse the way that it happened in previous kind of, you know, ranges like here, like this one, this pullback, right? Take a look at this from the high down to the low. It took 145 days, and it was the same drop. It was 33%, you know, and Bitcoin right here, on this occasion here, it was 32%, right? So, but it was half the time. And so it was, you know, I think it was half as painful, or maybe even much less than half as painful. It didn't feel anywhere near as bad as this one, I'll tell you. So, yeah, I really like the look of that. It's a nice Ichimoku cloud right there. Let's take a look at the EMAs. Some nice EMA development here, a little bit of support, a little bit lower down, and on the daily, yeah, it's some good solid support kind of entering that 90k range there. So I'm seeing a ton of confluence with everything that I've been telling you guys today on this chart right here. You know, other charts still looking interesting. Let's take a look at Trump coin, obviously. One of the more interesting coins in this market cycle. Now, I'm so glad we have Trump coin. I know that there's so much controversy around it, but I think it's just cool to have a coin that you can meme trade based on the president of the US. It's just, you know, it's just entertaining. It's nice. And, you know, it's not even a horrible chart. It kind of, you know, like if you can kind of take the time to understand it, you're looking at, you know, quite, you know, pump and dump, you know, shit coin type of trading here, which is, you know, in itself kind of crazy, but you know, it's I think it does make for an interesting chart, and definitely, you know, one that I'm interested in kind of continuing to look at here. So, you know, a little bit of support right here where Trump is at the moment. You know, it's interesting that Trump kind of dropped as Bitcoin was rising. Clearly, you know, I think just a sign that, you know, capital does like to move towards safer places. You know, really with any excuse, you know, it'll do it for any reason. But yeah, really cool stuff here. I'm liking the looks of this. I think that it all looks pretty decent. If you want to see that day trading rant style video, let me know. There are a couple of other videos I've been thinking of, like one of them about kind of, you know, if you were wrong about the Bitcoin, you know, kind of stuff in the last couple of weeks, months, then watch this video, and I want to kind of talk to you guys about how you can prevent that from happening again. We already did that in this video, so I don't know if you'd be interested in that, but let me know about that in the comment section as well. With that, ladies and gents, you know what to do. Hit up those likes, subscribe, tick that bell, do all that good stuff. You've got some phenomenal offers if you want to take advantage of some of the best exchanges in the game. But again, only if you're not from restricted regions. Smash up those likes, subscribe, tick the bell, do all that stuff, and I'll see you all in the next one. Cheers.